I mean, imagine some crazy scenario where the promise, the full faith and credit, one day turns into an announcement that as of 4 hours from now, these two pieces of colored paper have zero value. I mean, that couldn't possibly happen. But here's the interesting thing. If the value was based on the promise, and that promise is broken, and the people who gave that promise just told you, this now has value 0 in 4 hours, what is the value of that piece of paper? 0, right? But that's not what happened. It's not what happened at all. For months after that announcement was made, yes, the paper was valued less, 10% less, 15% less, 20% less, but it still had value. Even though the people who made the promise told you it was 0, you could exchange it for 80% of face value in one of the many available locations where corruption no longer exists and you can't exchange money, you know, all of that story. Unless, of course, you're connected and wealthy enough to afford the 20% depreciation. But it only depreciated by 20%, maximum. I bet you could still find some in circulation today. And I bet they still don't have value of 0. In fact, in the history of currencies, we rarely find any currency that goes to 0. I can go to Rome in Italy, and I can get silver coins that have the face of Julius Caesar on them. Coins that have not been in circulation for almost 1,000 years, and yet their value is not 0. In fact, their value exceeds their worth in silver. They're still a tradable abstraction of value. The reason your money did not go to 0 was because its value was not the promise. It's because its value was that illusion. And that illusion was shaken, but not destroyed. Because you start panicking at first. You're like, this has 0 value. And then someone says to you, oh, don't worry. I know this guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who will give you 80% on it. And no longer has 0 value. Now it's just depreciated. Because you give it value through your use. Because you give it value by believing in that promise. But in order for that promise to hold, it has to have some other characteristics. It has to be unforgeable. If it can be forged, then you have an emerging phenomenon that in economics is called Gresham's law, where bad money chases out good money. Where if you get your hands on the good money, you do not spend it. You stuff it under the mattress. Sound familiar? Happened here. If you had an old note and a new note, there is no way you're spending the new note until you get rid of all of the old notes. So all the new notes disappear from circulation immediately. Their velocity goes to 0. And people trade the old note. But if they trade the old note, it's in circulation. And the longer it remains in circulation, the longer people hold on to it and hoard the new ones. Gresham's law in action. I did not believe I would see that in my lifetime. Thank you, India, for validating my economics professor by demonstrating Gresham's law in a 1.5 billion person laboratory. Sucked, painful, but nevertheless, very interesting economics.